Greetings to all my dear students. I am Mrs. Payaswini, your English teacher. In these challenging times, to help you keep in touch with the subject, a video lesson has been prepared for you. The first lesson that we are going to study is My Mother at 66 by Kamla Das. My Mother at 66 is a beautiful poetry written by Kamla Das, who is a poet, who is a rebel, and who is a feminist. Kamla Das was born on 31st March 1934 and she died on 31st May 2009. Now, she used her pen name as Madhavi Kutty. After marriage, her name changed to Kamla Das. She was an Indian English poet, an Indian poet writing in English language, as well as a leading Malayalam author. She belonged to Kerala, India. Her popularity in Kerala is based chiefly on her short stories and autobiography. She was also a widely read columnist and wrote on diverse topics including women's issues, childcare, politics, among others. Before reading the poem, let's talk about the features of poetry of Kamla Das. So the first feature was that she was a supporter of iconoclasm. Now, it means an action of assertively rejecting the existing beliefs and practices that are there in the society. An iconoclast is a person who attacks the settled beliefs in the society, for example, patriarchy. Of course, she was a feminist. She believed in shattering the existing stereotypical beliefs. She was a confessional poet and writer, which means that in her poetry, she very boldly admits her feelings that she has without any sense of guilt. She was a straightforward poet and writer, which means that she does not feel ashamed when she confronts her feelings. Now, the last and important point that she confronts female sexuality in her poems. She talks about different parts of the female body, which was a very bold move on her part, being an Indian poet and writer. Now, there's a question for you, students. Which other poet writes in a confessional style about whom you have already read in the previous grade, that is in standard 11th? Now let's move towards the central theme of the poetry before we begin. This poetry talks about the fear of a daughter when she suddenly realizes that in the hustle and bustle of her life, she had forgotten that her mother is getting old, and this process of aging would eventually lead to their separation after the death of her mother. Inevitability of death has been addressed along with the fear of losing one's parents. However, the poem ends on a note of hope, where the poet hopes to see her mother alive upon her return. Now let's begin with the text. My mother at 66. Driving from my parents' home to Cochin last Friday morning, I saw my mother beside me, doze, open mouthed, her face. Here, the poet is driving to Cochin from her parents' home, and her mother is sitting beside her. She has come to see her off at the airport, and she sees that her mother has fallen asleep. Doze means sleeping. And her mouth is open, and the poet notices something about her mother. Now, what is it? Ashen like that of a corpse means a dead body, and realized with pain that she was as old as she looked, but soon put that thought away and looked out at young trees sprinting. Sprinting means running. The merry children spinning. Here, the poet suddenly realizes, there is a sudden realization that her mother is so old, and this realization comes with pain, because if she is getting old, that means she is approaching towards her death, and her death means their separation. But as any other person, we don't want to confront the fears in our lives, and therefore quickly she puts that thought away, and instead she starts looking at stark contradicting images which are exactly opposite of her mother, that is young trees sprinting means sprinting symbolizes energy, vigor, and also merry children, they symbolize young age. So therefore these two images, young trees and merry children, they are quite contrary, they are in stark opposition to the image, to the thought in the mind of poet that her mother is getting old. So perhaps she uses these to looking at these trees or looking at children as a distraction to shoo away the thought of her mother getting old and eventually dying. Out of their homes. But after the airport's security check, standing a few yards away, I looked again at her. Wan, wan means colorless, pale, as a late winter's moon, and felt that old familiar ache. Ache means pain. My childhood's fear. But all I said was, "See you soon, Amma." All I did was smile and smile and smile. Here, uh, she tries to distract herself by looking at the trees, the children coming out of their homes. But death is something that is inevitable. We cannot escape the reality of getting old and dying. Therefore, she again notices the wan, colorless, pale face of her mother, and she compares it to a late winter's moon, because a late winter's moon is also dull and it lacks the shine and luster. And the old familiar ache means the fear or the pain of losing her mother, which is there since childhood. Now, children, they have this fear that what will happen if they lose their parents, how are they going to live without them. And now she realizes that the fear that she had since her childhood, now very soon that is going to turn into a reality. Her nightmare is going to turn into a reality, but she says nothing about it. She just suppresses her feelings, she hides her feelings, and the poetry, it finally ends on an optimistic note. And she hopes to see her mother, whom she addresses as Amma, and she only smile and smile and smile. Here, repetition is there to emphasize on the word smile. She smiles to hide away her pain, and she wishes to see her mother when she returns back to her parents' home once again. So although the poetry is about pain, it addresses pain, but it ends on an optimistic note, or rather it tries to avoid the pain that is hidden in the mind of the poet, and it gives a hope to the poet as well as to the readers that once more she would be able to see her mother. Now let's talk about the various poetic devices used in the poetry. My Mother at 66. The first one which I would like to point out is Epiphany. It means appearance or manifestation in literary terms. Now, as a poetic device, it means a moment of sudden awareness, knowledge, or realization, after which the events are seen in the light of the realization that the character has. For example, here in this poetry, when Kamla Das, she sees her mother sitting beside her like a corpse, like a dead body, she suddenly realizes that her mother is too old and she does not have much time left in this world. Now, after this realization, she started to see everything in this light, in a different light, which means that getting old of her mother is inevitable and so is her death. Now, there's a question, which poem talks about the separation of mother and daughter that you have read in the previous grade? You have to compare both of them. Other poetic devices that have been used are simile, face ashen like a corpse, and as a late winter's moon. Here, comparison has been done using words like, and as. Therefore, it is simile. Personification, trees sprinting. Trees cannot run. Also, it is a visual imagery. Repetition, smile and smile and smile. Here, emphasis has been given on the word, on the feeling, that she is trying to suppress away the feeling of fear that her mother is going to die one day. Therefore, smile has been repeated. Enjambment, when words or phrases are carried over to the next line of the poetry. So here you can find enjambment all over the poetry. When words of one line are carried over, taken to the next line of the poetry. Now, if we read the poetry, that she was as old as she looked, but soon put that thought away and looked out at young trees sprinting. We observe that the poetry does not follow any particular rhyme scheme. Hence, it can be said to be in free verse. Now it is the time for recapitulation. Why are the young trees described as sprinting? When a person is there in a moving vehicle, the trees appear to be running behind. Also, these trees are in stark contradiction to the mother, to the aged mother sitting beside her. Why has the poet brought in the image of merry children spilling out of their homes? Here, the image of merry children is in opposition, in contradiction to the old mother. Therefore, this imagery has been used. Why has the mother been compared to the late winter's moon? As a late winter's moon loses its shine and luster, so has the mother. She is now old, she lacks energy, she lacks vigor. Therefore, this comparison has been done. What do the parting words of the poet and her smile signify? Parting words, that is, see you soon, Amma, it signifies the optimism that the poetess has, that she wishes to see her mother once again, to defeat their separation, which is ultimately going to happen, but for the time being she just wants to avoid it. And her smile, although she is smiling, but it is just a process, a way to hide her feelings, to hide her fear, the fear of losing her mother.
Thank you for listening patiently. I hope it added to your knowledge. Stay safe, stay sanitized. Thank you.